All right, welcome to Peace of Mind Radio Podcast. I am Brian Ramsey, that is Eric Douglas, and that is Chris Vaughn. And today's topic's pretty interesting. It's one that actually Chris came up with. Is what we like to do, as you guys know if you've been watching this any time, we typically like to take something that's happening during a client meeting, right? So it's kind of real life scenarios. And we bring it up for discussion, and we say, hey, here's an incident that happened. Chris had one last week, which we're doing first. I had another one this morning, and you guys were giggling about it because I was like, oh, my gosh. And so you said, what is it? And I said, this is what's happening. And you were like, let's do a show on it. So
I had a really good one a couple, 3 weeks ago, too, that we can throw out there if we want to.
Yeah. So anyway, those are the two for this week and then the one next week. So we're shooting them back to back today. But anyway, Chris, why don't you open up and explain what it is that happened in your client meeting, and then we'll just kind of round robin how we want to approach it.
Okay, so without going into why this is important, what happened the other day it was not in a meeting. It was my personal CPA, who also has quite a few of my clients, called me up venting. He was very frustrated, and he said he just had a client come in to do their taxes. Of course, this time of year they're getting ready to do the you have to file if you had an extension, right? Mid-October.
For personal, correct.
Yeah, businesses, September, correct. Yeah. So he said, he was so frustrated because he had this client come in, and their advisor, who is a highly credentialed advisor, that's important, gave them a piece of advice. There was $75,000 left on the house. And the suggestion the advisor had given was pay that off by taking the $75,000 out of your IRA. Right? Now, if you've been paying attention to these podcasts or you know anything about this, everything that's in your IRA is subject to income tax. So then the advisor said, take the $75,000 out, pay that off. And the reason that he wanted to do that is because there'd only be $2,000 in taxes. And the explanation was that of the $75,000, $65,000 of it was not subject to tax. Only $10,000 was. And of that $10,000, roughly 15% federal, 5% state of Kentucky. That's 20% in total, so $2,000. So the problem with that is, and we did get another CPA actually walked in and we were talking about this. Theoretically, that's possible, but it's an extremely unusual situation where you've got a non-deductible IRA. And in this case, I confirmed that it was not. So the advice that was given would have cost huge tax implications. And in addition to that, Eric and I were talking about it, the interest rate that they're getting on their mortgage is considerably lower than even fairly low-risk investments. So there were two major problems that came up.
You're definitely taking more of a tax hit to pay off a really low interest rate on a mortgage loan. So without even questioning the decision, which we absolutely are, the decision itself really wasn't grounded in solid financial advice, to be perfectly clear. But even aside from that, I think where we're trying to go here with this is the decision was made by one person with their team of people, right?
Exactly. There's the problem.
Exactly. So I'll let you take it from there, and you can continue your point.
So the main point that I had to this whole thing was, okay, once again, this was a highly credentialed and most likely experienced advisor. But if they were consulting with other advisors as part of their team, whether those other advisors were working with the same client or not is irrelevant. If they were consulting with the CPAs and in certain other situations, and I got another story if we have time I'll throw out there, this would have been caught in advance. As part of working with a team is there's multiple heads going in and they're seeing things that you may not have noticed that could be a big deal to the client. So in this case, another advisor, or if the CPA was part of the advice up front, they would have caught this and said, no, that's not the case. This is not a capital gains situation. It's an income tax situation. It does not make sense. And it's not in the client's best interest to do this.
All right, let's start off with one quick thing that I forgot to do in the beginning. Phone number. If you're listening on podcast and you...
Let's bring it back to us, right?
Yeah. So, but no, I want to address one thing that you said too. But first of all, if you're listening on podcast and you are not watching us on our YouTube channel or any other means, our phone number, if you want to get a hold of us, is 502-200-5210. And you can hit any of our extensions and we'll be happy to talk to you. Now, let's go back to, let's address one thing up front you said.
Yeah, go ahead.
And that is the reason that we are not solo practitioners and that we have put together this team is that we all have our own specialties. I don't want to call it a specialty. We have areas of interest within the overall planning aspect that we have a passion for, or we just have more experience in.
Yep.
Right? And so, as an example, Chris is a lot more, he has a certification in long-term care insurance, but he also has a lot more knowledge in that space than I do. And so I may work with a particular client, and they come to me and say, hey, I need long-term care insurance. And while I know a little bit, and I know enough to be able to give recommendations, I often go to Chris and go, hey, Chris, here's this situation, kind of give me some feedback. So I think it's important that everybody sort of understand that when you're working with one advisor and there's no one else there, while it can be okay, you can't be a master of all knowledge. And so that's what we've done as a team, is sort of built ourselves around areas of expertise, or areas of expertise, or at least a passion for a particular subject matter. And so we often sort of rely on those folks, because I would say when it comes to trust planning, I probably have had more experience and know more and have done more of those than anybody here.
Sure.
So when it comes to that kind of thing, these guys have a tendency to come to me and say, hey, this is what we're working on, or got a question about it, and then we can all sort of give feedback around it. So I think that's important. Number one is to not only have, number one is to have the advisor have a team around them that they can then go to internally to get advice about different aspects around the financial planning process. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, so now let's go to the external advisors, right? So let's kind of round robin that. You guys know my father had a CPA firm for years and years and years and years. And so I know I had to ask him, a lot of the clients that we worked with, almost nearly every one of them, we would get together, I don't want to say every year, but every couple of years, and we would just sit down and say, okay, are we doing everything we should be doing? Or, what could we be doing? And I'd often ask him, hey, do you see that happen very often with advisors? And he's like, no, I hardly ever get a phone call from an advisor asking me for advice about a client that we share.
And that's a shame.
Yeah. Now, he is my dad, so I would call him a lot, and he's, I get free tax advice. But other than that, no, but I think it is important. You guys I've heard you guys do it. I know you do it because I've seen the clients and CPAs and everything in here. But you also know I do it. We purposely have a meeting on the calendar every year with a client to specifically have a conversation with their tax preparer.
That's right.
And so we don't do it every single year, but I'd say at least every other year for sure.
Well, especially if we're talking about major decisions. And I was in just such a meeting literally a few days ago, earlier this week. I was at a table with the client's power of attorney, with the CPA, actually two CPAs. This is the kind of client that actually has a team of CPAs working on his account as well. And also because they were actually changing estate planning attorneys. So the new estate planning attorneys, two CPAs, myself, and a power of attorney. We were collectively making decisions on behalf of the client, because anything that happens in one area of this client's portfolio, or really I should say their kind of overall financial plan, it's going to have an effect on everything else.
Right.
So if one domino falls over here, it's going to affect everything else, right? So he had sold a couple businesses in the last year. So that's why we needed to talk about some tax ramifications of selling those businesses and receiving that income, and what kind of tax treatment that's going to incur. At the same time, we have some issues with his portfolio that we need to get squared away. Well, if I make any major changes in his portfolio this year, that's going to trigger some tax effects. So we need to kind of balance the two, right? These are the kinds of issues where if you have a team of people around you and that team is talking to each other and is involved in all aspects of your financial plan, that is really where you get holistic financial planning that really, really benefits you in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so Chris and I share a client, a new client.
Yeah.
That came in, and what's interesting is they have a fairly decent-sized net worth, had been a business owner at one point, some other issues going on, but we got them all in the same room and said, all right, we're going to hash out this particular issue that was going on. I won't go into that right now. But anyway, they had an issue, and they wanted to basically get other opinions is really what they were looking to do. But we thought, great opportunity to get an estate planning attorney and their CPA involved, and we literally called both of them and said, hey, we need to sit down and meet with this client. They've got these couple of issues they want to sort of talk through. Yep. And we could have given them advice. but we needed their CPA there, and their CPA could never have given them that holistic advice that we gave. And the estate plan attorney, great estate planning attorney, I've used him for years and years and years with clients, could not have, by himself, had really given them the input that they wanted, during that particular meeting. So we literally just called them up and said, hey, we're all going to get together. And when we did, ironically enough, at the end of that meeting, the client we had a couple clients in there. But anyway, at this one particular client said, that's the first time I've ever met with my entire team.
Wow.
He had never done that before. You remember him saying?
Yeah, you're right.
He had never met with everybody together. He had conversations with other folks, but had never sat down with the entire team. It makes a difference because what I have found, especially with CPAs, and you mentioned your CPA. One thing I had that I have an issue with, I love CPAs, right? I mean, my dad's obviously one. But the problem I have is that they have a tendency to only look at the historical numbers.
Yeah.
Right? So they're trained to take the data you give them, look historically, and say, what have you paid? What have you paid over the years? How are things looking different? But they never really look long term, right? So while they may give you advice, hey, put money here or do this, what they don't look at is, they look at the immediate impact of that particular decision, i.e. putting money in a 401k. Right? Yes, you need to max out your 401k. Well, hold on. I would say of the three of us, the more often than not, we're telling people to not do that because if you look long-term down the road, which is what we do, which CPAs have a tendency to not do, we look at the long-term ramifications of that decision. But you need to find out from the CPA how it impacts them today to be able to articulate to that, well, here's what your impact is today, but also you need to consider, what happens 10, 15, 20 years down the road.
But also when you're having that meeting, when you're working with that team, and you talk about, okay, here's what I want you to do, Mr. and Mrs. Client, because of what's going to look like 10, 15 years down the road. Now, Miss CPA, how does that impact us now? And you get all of the people on your team actually focused on what is in your best interest and working together, then you actually get the best possible results.
Yeah, I mean, you're going from a micro level view from a tax planning perspective, and then adding a macro layer on top of it,
exactly.
right? And that's what I think you're talking about. CPAs, they tend to look at things in a microwave, right? Kind of, I'm going to look at this year's tax returns and focus on how best to save clients money
because most
this
people
year.
hire the CPA and say, "Get me the biggest possible return this year,"
which is absolutely, there's value in that. That's fantastic to do. That's very, very important. But when we're looking at tax liability, we tend to look at it from a macro view.
Correct.
We're not so worried about saving you taxes this year. I'm worried about saving you taxes over a
lifetime,
over the next couple of decades. And that's a different strategy. And sometimes that involves taking a hit. Maybe this year, for example, we've got, if you're watching at home, by the way, you're going to get a tax increase in 2026. Everybody is going to get a tax increase. Our current tax cuts expire then.
If not before then.
And that's assuming they don't expire before then. Absolutely. Yeah. So, all that to say is sometimes it makes sense to go ahead and, take a tax hit today.
Take a small hit now in order to get a small hit now in order to have a better situation.
Absolutely. And so you're going to save yourself a greater amount of taxes in the long run, but on a micro level, it's not going to look so great sometimes. So.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. We did a podcast on this not too long ago. Oh, and by the way, if you're listening on podcast and you think we're pretty interesting, you want to come see us, we don't charge for anybody to come see us the first time. Come, as they say, kick the tires and see what we're all about and ask us whatever questions you want. Be happy to do that. Our phone number, 502-200-5210. And I'm sure Mr. Producer there.
Twice he's got that in there.
I know. Mr. Producer's going to throw that up on the screen. He's giving me a thumbs up. Or it could be the middle finger. I'm not sure which one he gave me, but I'm going to take it as though it's a thumbs up. But anyway, so the other thing that we've had a podcast on in the past, and it's just important to reiterate, I had a client say this. Actually, Mr. Producer, he's Aaron, by the way, back behind there. You and I were on a call, and a lady had called up and said, I had questions about a special needs trust. And who was she getting her advice from? Her next door neighbor.
Oh,
remember that?
On a special needs trust?
Yeah.
Oh,
and she was like, oh, well, I was told this. And I was like, no, none of that's right. And she was like, really? And I'm like, yes. You know why it's not right? Because you're getting advice from your neighbor, not from somebody that specializes in it. So anyway, I guess that's the other point is just when you're seeking advice when it comes to financial matters, or really any matter for that matter, it doesn't make any difference. But especially financial matters that impact your life financially, make sure that you're going to see an expert, somebody that specializes in that. Things like Social Security, taking a lot. I think we were I forgot who it was. We were talking. They were like, "Oh, I drew Social Security at 62, the first opportunity," and and they were like, "Oh, but it's 78 years old by the time it's break even." Like, no. Because if you're still working and everything else, the break even is much, much longer than that. But anyway, people they just think, take Social Security at your first opportunity, no matter what. And that's, again, not all, but that's probably advice from their neighbor, right?
Exactly.
Or what they've heard over the years. And, you got to look at it depending on your particular situation. So I guess that's the point.
Conventional wisdom, that can be a very dangerous thing.
Yeah. I guess that's the point is, and really the point of the whole, this whole program is really about, seeking advice from professionals, seeking the right advice from the right professional, right? Yep. Making sure if you got tax questions, you're not going to your estate planning attorney asking a tax question. You need to go to your tax preparer.
Even though those people have knowledge of it, it's like if you take a bad step off of a curb and you tear your knee up, you don't go to a brain surgeon, even though he's a doctor. He's not an orthopedic surgeon, which is the specialty that you need. Go to somebody who has an expertise in that specific field.
Great analogy.
Yep. No, that's exactly right. So anyway, I think that's about it for this week. Great topic, Chris. It's important that we continue to talk about seeking advice from the right people, making sure that you surround yourself with the right team. Make sure you have a good estate planning attorney. Make sure you have a good CPA. Make sure you have a good financial advisor. By the way, if you don't have any of those three, call us, come see us. We'll be happy to wrap a team around you. We work with a slew of all the above to make sure we match clients up with the right advisors. So anyway, phone number for us, again, 502. It's not O. Sorry, there is no O in dialing a number. Sorry. 502 200. Well,
you sound like me now.
No, my finance professor, when I was getting my MBA, if you ever said O, he would throw something across the room. He's like, no, there's no O in numbers. Yeah, he's right. 502-200-5210. Anyway, so that's it. Make sure you tune in next week. I believe the topic is...
What were we talking about?
I don't know.
I got it written over there. Anyway, tune in next week. It's a surprise to us, too.
We'll figure out something before then.
It's a surprise to us. I know what it was. It's making sure that you articulate, or at least you write down where all your stuff is and that you organize, so that you don't drive your beneficiaries and your executive crazy. Yeah. So anyway, that's an interesting topic because we got a couple of scenarios we're going to talk about in the next week. So anyway, thanks for tuning in this week. Thanks for watching. Every week we put out information, and have a great week. And I'm going to let Eric sort of sign us off.
Yep. If you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate it. Make sure you click that subscribe link. Be the first to get notified whenever we drop any new content on our YouTube channel. If you're listening on literally any podcast channel that you prefer, make sure you leave us a like or a comment or a review. We really appreciate it. That is what helps the show grow. So once again, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it. The information given herein is taken from sources at IFP Advisors, LLC, doing business as Independent Financial Partners, IFP, IFP Securities, doing business as IFP, and its advisors believed to be reliable, but it is not guaranteed by us as to accuracy or completeness. This is for informational purposes only, and in no event should be construed as an offer to sell or solicitation of an offer to buy any securities or products. Please consult your tax and/or legal advisor before implementing any tax and/or legal-related strategies mentioned in this publication, as IFP does not provide tax and/or legal advice. Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not take into account the particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs of individual investors. This report may not be reproduced, distributed, or published by any person for any purpose without IFP's express prior written consent. Securities offered through IFP Securities, LLC, doing business as Independent Financial Partners, IFP, member of FINRA and SIPC. Investment advice offered through IFP Advisors, doing business as IFP, a registered investment advisor. IFP and Family Wealth Planning Partners are not affiliated. The information given herein is taken from sources that IFP Advisors, LLC, doing business as IFP, IFP Securities LLC, doing business as IFP, and its advisors believed to be reliable, but it is not guaranteed by us as to accuracy or completeness. This is for informational purposes only, and in no event should be construed as an offer to sell or solicitation of an offer to buy any securities or products. Please consult your tax and/or legal advisor before implementing any tax and/or legal related strategies mentioned in this publication, as IFP does not provide tax and/or legal advice. Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not take into account the particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs of individual investors.